Christian parenting.
Welcome to Pardon the Mess. I'm your host, Courtney DeFeo, and on this podcast, we talk about raising kids as Christian parents. It's so very important for me to honor God with my family and the 2 kids that He's given me. But honestly, it's not always neat or easy or tidy, but it's always worth it. So join us every week to laugh and learn together on this beautiful and messy journey of parenting. Friends, so let me tell you about a time there was a lollipop in Larson's diaper. Yes, it's been a minute since she's had a lollipop in a diaper, but do y'all remember, and you're in those days, if you've got little kids, you're like, I will do anything to get through this Target or through this doctor's appointment. And so lollipops were often what I'm just like, here, take this. It'll distract her for like 12 whole seconds and then we'll get on with our day. But I think we were leaving a haircut place where she got a lollipop as a prize. And then she must have decided at some point in the car seat she didn't want the lollipop, so she put it down. And somehow she must have had on bloomers or something, but that lollipop found its way into the side of her diaper. So imagine that, my surprise later when I'm changing her diaper and I'm like, literally, how did a lollipop get in here? Like, I just was frozen for a second. Like, did she just poop a lollipop? Like, what is happening? But I've figured out the story later. But if you were in that moment where you're laughing right now because you remember it, or you're like, yep, I'm using lollipops myself. But this is an episode, and actually 2 episodes, we're breaking it up into 2 parts that I've been wanting to bring to you guys for a long time. So if you've got babies in your life, or you've got toddlers or elementary school kids, you may be feeling a lot of angst on like, I want to raise them to do good things and to obey their mom and dad, but I feel so lost. And I remember feeling that way. There was a lot of conflicting information. There was maybe one school of thought that was very militant and very much like, let's punish our kids and just, make sure they know what's right and wrong. And then I think there's a culture of people swinging way far to the other side that's like, well, let's just not do that. Let's just like let it ride. And that's not helpful either. So there's got to be a place in between where you feel like you've got some structure or a way or some help that is both based in scriptural truth, but also reality and where your kids are developmentally. Like, they're different at 2 than they are at 4, and what they can do at 6 is different than what they can do at 8. And so I am truly pumped about the next 2 episodes because it was so long that we cut it into 2, but release them both today. Part 1 and part 2 with Dr. David and Amanda Erickson is coming, and it's called The Flourishing Family is the book and the ministry that they're all about. And I have got the resource here. I've been to their site. We've had this conversation, and I really, really love just who they are and the uniqueness they bring as a couple that is actually parenting kids in their home right now, but is based in scripture along with a passion for child development. So enjoy part 1 and part 2 of our chat with Dr. David and Amanda Erickson. Well, good morning, Dr. David and Amanda Erickson. How are you guys?
Hey, thanks for having us. We're great.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Well, I'm going to shock to my listeners by saying I was on the treadmill the other day, which I exercise like twice a year. So they're like, what? You were on the treadmill? But I was on the treadmill listening to my friend Heather McFadden's podcast, and you guys were guests on there. And I just loved everything that you were sharing. And so I promptly sent our producer and said, we need to get them on. So good. So thanks for being here today.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. That's so good to hear.
So we're going to get very practical, but before that, I am a product of like strong-willed, and none of these books are horrible, but I wanted a way. Like I would read anything when my kids were little, like Strong-Willed Child, and we did a course, Growing Kids God's Way, and then I'm sure I did like Baby Wise, and everyone I could get my hand on, I wanted a way. And I don't think that's a wrong desire to kind of go, I have no idea how to parent these people. How do I help my babies and toddlers learn something that's scriptural, but also like we need to run a house where people aren't smacking each other and screaming at each other all the time. And so, particularly if you came from a house that didn't do that, it can be really overwhelming. So what is your new way? You've got a new book, The Flourishing Family, and I've loved what I've read through and love what you guys are about. So what's that way that you're trying to offer parents?
Right.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I mean, so we're not offering like a very prescribed method that this is the way to do it and it's going to work for every single kid, because every parent who has 2 to 3 kids knows, that's not reality. There is no one prescribed way that works for every kid. But where we often struggle, and you're exactly right, is connecting principles. Like we have these principles from scripture and we see them, and then we're just like, but how do I execute this in the reality of my life, in the day to day with my kids? That's where a lot of parents really struggle. And so we wanted to try in our book to kind of lay out both, like the big picture scriptural principles, and then get down into the nitty gritty of, okay, what does this look like with a 2-year-old? What does this look like with our 5-year-old? And help parents have tools to put principles into action in their home.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's a little bit new or different from maybe what other Christian parents are used to is that it really takes a look at scripture alongside of modern neuroscience and child development, and really evaluating what we as Christians can step forward and confidently and in best practice, not just based on what evidence in science is saying, but also being faithful to scripture and to the calling that Christians have in the Bible and from Jesus. And so it's really kind of evaluating those two side by side and seeing what that might look like in everyday living.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. And I love that you brought up just every kid is different. Every home is different. Every background is different. One question my dad would probably want you to ask, because I grew up in an age of like the rod, and we're going to talk about that later, but like more military-esque, like discipline, you comply kind of thing. And then do you think that culturally we've swung towards make everybody happy? The kids have a voice. Like, so I'm a big like median kind of person. I'm like, yes, the discipline is important, but also seeing them as humans and respecting them too. And so do you feel like you've seen that cultural shift too? And what do you think about that?
Absolutely.
Yes. Oh yeah. We definitely see that cultural shift happening. And, a lot of parents who were raised in relatively strict disciplinary environments, and so they kind of swing pretty hard the other direction, and then they don't know what to do. Like they know what they don't want to do. They don't want to do what their parents did.
Right.
But they kind of lack a vision for, but how do I discipline my kids? How do I guide them and point them forwards when I'm not just going to stand here and demand it and physically do things to force compliance, but at the same time, like we actually have to go out this door and go to Target and buy food because we are all hungry.
Right. Right.
That's so good.
We heard it a couple of weeks ago. We were at an event and somebody used this description of sort of one of the tricky parts about parenting today is that like we are parenting with the wisdom of 10 TikTok videos, and we have like information overload, and some sound really great ideas. Like it's important to validate emotions and let our children know like how you're feeling matters to me. Absolutely. This is a good thing, but that's not where you stop when they're hurting each other or when they don't, want to get out the door to go shopping. Like that's not where you stop, but that's where the TikTok video stops. And so there's just a massive lack of tools and knowledge of what to do instead. And so, I want to in general assume the best. Most parents of our parents' generation did the best they could with the information they have. And I think, even though the pendulum has swung the other way, I think most parents are trying to do the best they can with the information they have. But it is leaving people with questions of like, this feels chaotic because it is chaotic. So what do I do?
Yeah. And I think you would probably hear from, and I've had friends like this that kind of swung really hard and just kind of survived the little years and the toddler years. And then they get to like 8 and they're like, uh-oh, I wish I had started a little bit earlier. So talk to us, and I'm hoping all ages listen today, but I guess start with the power of like, if you've got little ones, babies, toddlers, why is it so important to kind of lay some groundwork on what you do? What is your plan? And then will you go into your philosophy, which I love, is focusing on what to do versus what not to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would say starting at the early years, and I mean, like, we really intuitively get this when we have babies. They literally want to be on us, with us. Like they that strong physical bond of connection is very strong. And of course, then they get older and they start moving and they start crawling and they start walking and they start to create physical separation. But they still want that connection. And so leaning in and building strong connections in those early years, and then consistently maintaining those connections, and those change and develop as a child develops. My sons used to sit on my lap and we would connect and read books. Well, they're way too big to sit on my lap now. That's not how we're going to connect.
They still try.
But yeah, they still sit on you sometimes.
They do. And I'm like, I can't breathe.
But so there's connecting. Another part is beginning from early years, beginning to teach them about emotions. Mm-hmm. When people talk about the terrible twos, right, one of the amazing things about 2-year-olds is they basically have no emotional inhibitions at all.
And it's so delightful. It's so delightful and enjoyable when they're happy and joyful and, really receiving well whatever's going on.
Yes.
Because it's so big and it's like, wow, I kind of want some of that back,
Yes.
But then when it's not that, everything falls apart for so many parents because their capacity to handle that also big emotional response in a more uncomfortable way, it's actually pretty low because they never they didn't have that opportunity to grow it, in childhood or in adulthood yet. So
as parents, you're not going to teach your 2-year-old emotional regulation. It's not neurologically possible.
Right.
But you're starting through things like co-regulation and things like that. You're beginning to teach them the tools that will very slowly develop and they will come to own over time.
Can I give an example? I think your audience will I think it's helpful when we take a step back at it from not behavior, not emotions. When our children are infants and toddlers and preschoolers, we are always preparing them to be able to read and write and to know their colors and to do math. When we're going shopping with a toddler, so many parents are like, how many bananas? There's 3 bananas. What color are they? They're yellow. And we're kind of engaging them in the world around them because in 4 or 5 years, they're going to start they're going to start being able to do math, but they start by recognizing 1 banana, 2 banana. And so we are building a foundation for them to be able to do, 3-digit division in 4th or 5th grade, 3rd grade. But we're starting that when they're 18 months or 2 years old, just by how we're engaging with them. And so when we take that same concept, it's called scaffolding. When we take that same concept and apply it to behaviors and emotions, we're not expecting our toddler to act like a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old, but we are wanting to focus most of our corrective attention on preparing them for the future instead of just trying to punish it out of them, what's very often behaviors for a toddler or a preschooler. And so we're wanting to give them the tools now that they are going to be using later.
So my son Griffin and I just watched a movie that I am so excited to tell you about. It's called The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, and it's out in theaters on November 8th. Here's the story. The Herdmans are absolutely the worst kids in the history of the world. They lie, they steal, they bully, and now they've hijacked the town's Christmas pageant. This movie is directed by Dallas Jenkins, who brought us The Chosen, and based on the international bestseller by Barbara Robinson. The Best Christmas Pageant Ever follows 6 siblings. They sneak into church searching for snacks, and they walk away with the lead roles in the town Christmas pageant. Grace, who's played by Judy Greer, is directing the performance for the very first time, and she and her daughter Beth and husband Bob are in way over their heads, especially against a town that wants them to kick the Herdmans out. But the play's mischievous stars might unwittingly teach a community the true meaning of Christmas. Be sure to experience The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, only in theaters starting November 8th. You can get your tickets now at bestchristmaspageantever.movie.
We are well into the school year, and if you are looking for a little extra support for your kids in their academics, or if your kids are looking for an extra challenge in school, I highly recommend IXL Learning. IXL Learning is an online learning program for kids ages pre-K to 12th grade. It covers math, language arts, science, and social studies. IXL is designed to help them really understand and master topics in a fun way with positive feedback. And the best part is that IXL is so easy for parents. One site gets you all you need, and IXL customizes learning for each child and their needs. Everything on IXL is organized by grade, subject, topic, and subtopic, making it simple to find activities for the exact skills you are covering. And IXL offers instant feedback and explanations of new topics as kids are learning to use the program, so you can feel confident that your kids will gain an understanding of the skills they are learning. Make an impact of your child's learning. Get IXL now. And Pardon the Mess listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/today. Visit IXL.com/today to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price. Yes, I love that. I love that. One of the stories that's coming to mind for me is I remember when my kids were like 1 and 3 and they just started taking over my house. It was like I was working for them. Like it was just, I was so distraught. And my best friend said, she called me, it was kind of like a chest bump moment where she was like, we are the moms. Like, we are the moms. We're taking the house back or whatever. And so I think at times you're like, if I could just get till 5 and my husband would get home. And she was like, no, like they need to know that when we say stop, they are not running in the street and getting hit. And so there is a place for like, you know, them knowing your voice and stuff. But I do remember, I think you've said this, David, before, and I would be curious what age you think. But I remember Ella was 5 and we were in the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A. Imagine that. And she was about to hit her sister. And I saw her stop and like hold back. And she looked at me like she shocked herself. Like she had the like wherewithal to be like that, and versus me punishing and teaching them, like you said. So is that about this age that their heart starts getting engaged, or they start realizing like, oh, what mom said I shouldn't hit somebody? Or when does that age kind of switch?
Yeah, well, that's a good example of impulse control.
Yeah.
Really, I'm not sure that her heart was necessarily like wanting the best for her sister at that time. But
okay, that's fair.
yeah, I mean, you know, that's still a little advanced, seeing another person's perspective. But yeah, right around 5 years old for neurotypical kids, sometime between 5 and 7 is when their impulse control really, the part of their brain that allows for impulse control really starts to develop more quickly and sort of snowballs in development a little bit. And so you start seeing their ability to inhibit their desire to hurt someone. And when we've given them tools early on of like, here's what you're going to do instead, that also has equipped them to solve the conflict in a more peaceable and constructive way. But this is something that David reminds parents of, and especially dads all the time. Just because they've been able to do it one time does not mean they have the ability and capacity to do it forever after that.
Yes.
You know, development and growth is not a linear line straight up. There's going to be times when it comes back down. And so we do want to keep that in mind of what's their capacity right now, what's their ability, and do our part to support them at both levels.
Oh, I love that. So I need to find the paper. I was telling a friend last night, you know, I've got all the senior things happening. So I'm like drowning in thousands of photos, and just, you know, it's a very big time of like looking back and like being graceful with yourself to see what worked, to see where God did things in their life. And we, on Ella's baby dedication, we wrote down, we were in Atlanta at the time, we wrote down top 5 or 6 values that we wanted to see in her and see as a family. And my friend was like, you need to print those and frame those. And I also had prayed over for God to say, like, God, who do you see that she is specifically? And it's so cool to see the fruit of that, and to see like we did really prioritize, and you can't prioritize all, but there were a few that were really important to us. And it's been neat to kind of see those come to fruition. So let's get into some of those values and expectations. I know y'all talk about honesty and truthfulness. I don't know how you would label it. For us, it was like that idea of you will be more in trouble for the lie than you are. Like we wanted a home of like, you can come to us, you can tell the truth. So how does honesty and truthfulness and maybe even integrity look like in your house?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. You want to?
Well, I would say the first decision we make, because we do value we call it trustworthy because we want to take it outside of more than just like the words you say, but like when you're, you have a task to do that you are trusted to accomplish the task. We're not going to nag you about it to get it done. If you're trustworthy. So I would say the first decision we probably made was that the truth would always be safe.
Unconditionally safe.
Which is sometimes counterintuitive, especially if you're like thinking of punishing a child when they come and truthfully tell you the wrong thing that they did. Okay. And if that's your mindset, then, and then, if a child gets punished because they told the truth, you're not encouraging honesty and trustworthiness in that child. You're going in the opposite direction because you're thinking, well, the behavior needs to be punished. But you're accomplishing more than you're trying to accomplish in that moment. And so we made that decision pretty early on. That if you told the truth, that would always be safe. Right. And so that was our first thing. Of course.
We also didn't lie to our kids. Like we did not make up, you can't have that because we don't have M&Ms or whatever. I won't let you have M&Ms because we don't have any, but really they're in the back of the pantry. Like those kind of little white lies that a lot of times, like they seem to have an important role in parenting, but like we made a commitment, like we're not telling white lies. We will shoot straight with you and draw the boundary and say no,
and deal with the consequences.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was about to ask you, like, as they're not in trouble, but have there been natural consequences? Like, where do consequences fall in that if they came to something really big, that happened? How does that work with the consequence?
Well, so in the early years, I don't remember us having to deal with that very often. No. One thing that we see parents do is they accidentally invite their child to lie. Because they have seen the child do something, like they just hit their sister, all right? And they hit your sister. Okay, there's no doubt about what actually just happened. Whether you heard it or you saw it, you know. And you come in and you say, what did you do?
Or even, did you sister?
Or did you hit your sister?
Right.
And of course, a child might be like, no, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And so it's kind of like, don't invite that. Just say, you just hit your sister.
Right.
Like, just state the fact. The fact is known. You know the fact. They know the fact. Don't ask them to repeat the fact. That's where we kind of, especially in the young years, we're trying to develop that, like, we want you to know what you did was wrong, okay, or what you did was unacceptable. And we think getting them to orally admit it somehow is going to kick that in for them. And we invite them to lie to us. And it's really crazy that we do that. And so, we just come in, we observe, you just hit your sister. And then we're moving on from what we need to do from that
So
point.
Like consequences in that situation so he said at the very beginning, like no family, no kids are exactly alike. So how consequences look for our family are very specialized for our kids, but like separating them and attending to the person who's hurt was always our number one. Like always care for the physical and emotional needs of the person who was hurt first, and then come back and figure out what was going on. And we talk in our book about future facing consequences. So like really being aware of what happened leading up to the situation and assume it will happen again. And what can we do for our child to help them make a better choice in the future? And so instead of like, oh, y'all were fighting over the Paw Patrol, big Paw Patrol toy. Well, I'm going to put it away because y'all were fighting over it and it's going to be put away for a week and then maybe we'll bring it back out. Like, instead of doing that, say, we're going to put this away for right now because it's causing problems. This situation needs a break. We're putting this up. We'll try again in a little while. When we try again, here's what we're going to do. And you role play with them, even when they're toddlers, of the words that you want them to say and how you want them to, like the posture that you want them to have. And the next time emotions are escalated and they both want to play with it and they both don't want to share, are they going to be like, I remember mom gave us a script and we're going to use it?
Right.
Because no, they're not. The next time it's going to look a whole lot like it did their first time. And you're going to step in and really do the same thing. We're going to take a break and then we're going to practice how this can look. And as you practice with them and give them the opportunity to say the words you want them to say, to have the posture that you want them to say, that literally creates pathways in their brain. It wires their brain to do the things that you're expecting of them. And instead of just like pulling the thing out and being like, no, you can't play with this anymore, that doesn't actually help them learn problem solving skills. And so it's really taking those moments to teach them and give them opportunity to practice over and over again. And sometimes the consequence is going to be mom and dad enforcing a limit or a boundary. Sometimes it is going to be like, I know that you don't want to go to the car. I'm going to carry you to the car because we have to go. But in general, if we can rely more heavily on consequences that prepare them to do better in the future, instead of punishing them for what has now happened in the past, they are going to be served so much better in that scaffolding of skills and knowledge and wisdom and discernment and values.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. I love that. I wish I'd had you guys a few years ago. That would have been amazing. Really helpful. So true confession. So I wrote a book, a parenting book, Don't Laugh Out Loud, when my kids were like 2 and 5. It's fine. Everything's fine. It's called In This House We Will Giggle. And I really took like 12 different virtues and how we could have fun. How could we make it more of an experience versus lectures? And it was so fun. And I was coming out of corporate marketing with Chick-fil-A and thought, we can have more fun. Like being like loving Jesus and living it out is more fun than just this, you're in trouble all the time. And so I had a good time with it. But around that time, I realized that my youngest one was my strong-willed one, and she was not compliant and tried to do everything all the time, and major fits were going on. And so I was at my wit's end because the first one was like, yes, ma'am. Like you said, no Cheerios. I sure will do that. And then the second one was like, I maybe shouldn't have thrown that book out yet. But I had a behavioral psychologist come out, and this is what I would love for you to react to, just something she taught me, and I would love to see if you agree with it. But she came over and kind of watched me with them. And she said, because we're girls and I'm a female, she said, you're giving her way too many words. She's 3 years old. Like I was giving her a ton of attention. I was talking through all the things with her. And she was like, and when she was being good and they were playing nicely, I was completely ignoring them and expecting them to hash it out. And I was on my computer, multitasking, probably posting on Facebook. And she was like, I need you to just train your mind to reverse it. Like they need attention when they're doing it right. And you need to be way less engaged when she's doing it wrong. So would you agree with her assessment of how that was going?
100%. We even like our youngest, when he went to kindergarten, he picked up a couple of words that our family doesn't use. And I was like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I just ignored it. Like I didn't really respond. I pretend, like in my mind, it was very much pretending, because in my mind I was like, oh no, he cannot say that at church or in front of my parents
right.
Really his parent. And but I just basically was like, oh, okay, so he knows those words. And like I ignored it, and like 2 weeks later he wasn't using them anymore. And I was like, okay, like the less attention you give to unwanted behavior, like sometimes that is the best. And it feels very permissive to so many parents because they were overcorrected as a child. And so like it is ingrained in them. You have to correct every or most unwanted or inappropriate behavior, when really, if you can like let so much of it go and really correct, like your corrective attention goes to the things that are most important, that's really going to serve your child well, and also your relationship really well. Because then when your child is being corrected in a very serious, like this is a serious thing that we're talking about, I would tell my boys, like, you need to hear my firm voice. I am not angry, but this is important. And I would just tell them that. Like when you have to do that, they pay much better attention, because it's not the boy who cried wolf. It's not the mom who cried, you're in trouble, 13 times already today, and we haven't even had lunch yet. Yeah.
Okay, you may be thinking you want more, but we are going to pause this right here and send the rest of this conversation over onto a part 2 episode. So there's more where this came from, and I pray that you guys enjoy it. Share it with your spouse. Y'all listen to these together because there's some really good practical stuff in here. And again, I wish I'd had it when my kids were babies and toddlers. This is really helpful stuff. Or share it with a mom group, and y'all just get together and talk about while the kids are maybe running crazy at the playground, but talk about these practices and these ideas of how we can teach our kids to behave in a way that is both scriptural, but also reality, like where they are in child development. So I hope you've enjoyed this half of the episode, and part 2 will be coming next. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pardon the Mess. As always, we've got more encouragement and resources over at christianparenting.org. And you can also stay connected with us on social media at Pardon the Mess. And if you like this episode, I'd love for you to do 2 things. Press follow on whatever podcast platform you love, and also be sure to leave a rating so other parents can find us. Remember, you're never alone in this beautiful mess of parenting.
Looking to buy a car this season and not sure where to start? Try FlexCar instead. FlexCar is Atlanta's only month-to-month car lease that includes your vehicle, mileage, insurance, maintenance, roadside assistance, and more. Cars start at $199 per month, and there are 0 down payments. Plus, you can cancel anytime with no penalties or swap cars whenever your needs change. Get approved in minutes and pick up your car, or have your car delivered straight to you. Get started today at flexcar.com and receive 100 free miles on your first order with the code ATL100.